Sunday afternoon. They come from all over to witness a double Hare Krishna wedding at the Indian temple in Belfast, once a Methodist church. It's also a marriage of another kind, between two almost alien faiths and cultures, Christianity and Hinduism, Irish and Indian. The petite Sonia McGarr from Naas, County Kildare, is about to commit herself to Michael O'Hare, a former altar boy from an East Belfast Catholic parish. The other bride, a Jewess, is to marry a lad from Liverpool. This is the stuff of culture shock. Any mother, father, brother or sister might well ask, what motivates people to take such a drastic leap of faith and culture?
Well, one problem is that Ireland isn't multicultural, isn't multiracial or multi-religious. So it is a culture shock. There's no reference point. Who are these people? What is Hinduism? What is Vaishnavism? These are not known terms. If parents have problems like that, they should sit down with their children and try to understand them. The one thing I would say is don't close the door. Don't think that this isn't my child anymore. It is your child. I've seen many instances where parents have rejected their children and their children have been very upset about that. They've made a decision in their lives and respect the decision.
Place one spoonful on the top of the coconut.
Maybe it's a phase they're going through. They'll only be involved in Krishna consciousness for a few years, whatever. I mean, that has to be taken into consideration, and that happens quite a lot.
So in every country, every nation, there is some form of ceremony by which people promise each other a certain commitment. Have the rings? Where are those rings? No, that's okay, keep them going. We need as many blessings as possible for these couples. Yeah, okay. Anytime will do.
But from our side, we have to take the responsibility to help people understand who we are, what we're about. We have very strict moral codes. We have something to offer society. We have something to offer their children. You know, and they should help. We'd like to help them understand that. Initially, again, my mother didn't know how to react. She came to the temple in Dublin, and there I was with shaven head and saffron robes. There was only about 12 of us in the country at the time, so she thought it was a punk rock band I joined, actually. But anyway, yeah, she was quite upset for a couple of years, and I had a chat with her after a couple of years. I was also very young, and my reaction was also very immature, I think. And we sat down and we talked about it, and I said, look, this is what I want to do with my life. If I marry, I want to marry Hare Krishna. We're going to have Hare Krishna kids. You know, that's my destiny. Would you respect that? And I'll respect you. And from then on, we got on very well together, actually. And I think I have a much deeper and more understanding relationship with my mother than I ever had.
It's a monastic lifestyle. Like the devotees, they get up quite early in the morning time and they chant early, and they have these. We have our programs in the morning. We generally go through the day doing general chores and whatever we have to do around the island. And some people also, they go out and they distribute our literature or books and so on.
This is in Ishrath, an island owned by the Hare Krishnas on Upper Lough Erne. And the Hare Krishnas are a group I don't know very much about. But with me here is the temple president, Manu Das. He was formerly known as Martin Davies from Glasnevin. Manu, could you tell me briefly, what do the Hare Krishnas actually believe in?
Well, the main point from the Hare Krishna point of view is that we believe in the chanting of God's names. We understand there's only one God, but he has many, many names. And it's like in many religions, they have the name of God is praised, like Allah be praised, or hallowed be thy name, or thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain. So that is really our basis, because what we do is we chant the names of God very sincerely. Every day we chant something in the region of 16,000 names of God, and in this way we purify our existence and become closer to God.
People are probably wondering, how can you afford to buy a place like this?
Yeah, well, it's it is just in north of Ireland, so it wasn't as expensive as people sort of think it might have been. And we had a very good bank manager, and he was very kind to us and allowed us to get it on a mortgage. And we have lots of different ways, really. There's people who are full-time supporters, and they'll give whatever they can, and some bequests and things like that. And generally we have a small but pretty loyal following.
When you think of the Hare Krishnas, this is probably one of the most familiar sights that comes to mind. Making music, dancing and chanting play an integral part in the life and faith of the Hare Krishnas, because they believe that calling on the name of their God, Hare Krishna, will ultimately purify and transform them and the world they live in.
Krishna consciousness is an extremely ancient religion, steeped in the traditions of Hinduism. It was brought to the West in 1966 by an elderly Indian monk, Srila Prabhupada. Maybe the way it presents itself today is new, as in shops and restaurants like this one in Dame Street, for instance. But its scriptures, the Bhagavad Gita, and its spiritual writings go back as far as the Old Testament. Today, the Hare Krishnas cater spiritually for those disillusioned with a materialistic society. One devotee discovered Krishna at the rock festival Fela in Thurles.
But the first thing was the music, the chanting, because it was very spiritual. It was nice, atmosphere there. It wasn't like outside their tent. It was quite a lot of intoxication, a lot of people that were quite rowdy and, getting a bit heavy. But in there, it was much nicer. There was no real violence, although there was a bit of food and stuff thrown on the stage. But it was nice and calm, and they weren't intoxicated. They were enjoying themselves, and you could see that they weren't drunk or on drugs like anyone else. There was a lot of people that were around at the time. It's just ordinary boiled basmati rice, Indian rice, and the sabji, which is the vegetables, mixed vegetables. It's fried potatoes and fried curd. I was raised Roman Catholic, and on Sundays with my dad and my 3 brothers and 3 sisters, until I was about 13 or 14, I used to go to church in the morning every Sunday. And then when I got to about 13, we started saying we go to church on our own with our friends, but we just didn't really go. And that was, in school as well. I had religion classes every day in school. It was a basic Roman Catholic background, really.
And what about friends you had in the past?
They were all great. They were brilliant. None of them tried to stop me from coming to the temple room. None of them tried to get me to keep drinking alcohol or keep smoking. They all actually encouraged me to do what I was doing, because they could see the difference. They could see that I was benefiting from it. I was very happy.
Many Hare Krishna devotees live a fairly austere monastic type of lifestyle, but some have adapted that monastic model to suit their own family needs. For instance, here in the heart of Wicklow, a group of 6 Hare Krishna families have set up a little community for themselves.
They work the land, growing their own vegetables. They've even built a school for their children, and between them they employ a Hare Krishna teacher who lives in the schoolhouse with his wife and son. They aim at simplicity of lifestyle, honouring the words of their founder, simple living and high thinking.
Start with the biggest bridge at the bottom. It's good to start with the biggest, isn't it?
On Sundays they meet as a community for worship and a meal together. Hare Krishna devotees take 4 vows: no meat, no intoxicants, no illicit sex, and no gambling. Krishna even specified the exact type of food they should eat and how it should be prepared. Martin Blake is from Ballymurphy in Belfast. An IRA activist, he found Krishna consciousness while in Long Kesh. He married Helen Blameyer, a Protestant from the Malone Road area of Belfast. Today she's known as Hare Krishna, and his religious name is Uddhava. Far from sectarian Belfast, this is the place they've chosen to live and rear their 3 children.
No, we were just looking around, basically somewhere that wasn't too far from Dublin, and somewhere we had a few places because a few families wanted to move together. So by Christian's mercy, we found this nice place.
It's very different from Ballymurphy and Malone Road.
contrast.
It's lovely. I wanted my children to grow up in the country. I didn't want my children to grow up in the city. And I think they're having a beautiful childhood, and I'm so happy we moved here. I wouldn't have come if it was just us two, but we came, there's 6 families. We're all great friends. The children are all growing up together. They all have lots of friends, and it's just wonderful.
This is Pragosh, formerly Paul Murphy from Donnycarney in Dublin. It was the Hare Krishna philosophy that appealed to him. He married a woman from Andersonstown in Belfast, now Galoka. She was known as Nicola Dalton. They were the first to move out of the monastic setting into the country.
Growing up in Dublin, well, to start off, not whether it's Dublin or not, but everybody is seeking happiness, no matter who they are. We all want to be happy. None of us want to be sad or depressed or whatever. So, everyone's looking for that happiness, so you try to find it in different ways, etc. And one of the ways I unfortunately looked for it in when I was growing up was maybe I got into drinking a bit or into a few drugs, etc. And I quickly understood that I'm not going to find any happiness here. This is a waste of time. And around that time, I met the Hare Krishna devotees, and they reinforced that you can't, no matter what you try in this material world, if it's a material solution, it won't make you happy, because we're eternal, the body's temporary. So if we're trying to please the body, we're ultimately going to be frustrated. So we have to seek spiritual happiness. So it was really through frustration and the logic of that philosophical debate that brought me to a spiritual way of life.
Every aspect of my life changed, and just from the practical point of view that, well, I was already a vegetarian, but I'd have spent a considerable amount of my leisure time in the pub. And in fact, that was one of the things that clinched it for me when I moved into the temple, just to try it out, because I had already decided that I fully agreed with the philosophy and I wanted to try out the whole lifestyle. And when I saw in the temple that the devotees, they were all young people, they could have been down the pub in nightclubs, and they were quite happy in the evening to have a drink of hot milk and go to bed. I thought they must be fairly happy and confident in what they're doing, and they must be very satisfied within themselves. No concern about image or being cool. So that was actually clinched it for me. When I started working with these devotees, I asked them to explain to me a little about Krishna consciousness. They gave me some books, and it made a very big impression on me. It was like reading something about something that I already knew. It wasn't something mind-blowing that was very hard to understand. It was like reawakening something I already knew, but I had temporarily forgotten.
In one case, I wasn't completely. I was just introduced to Krishna consciousness. It was later on, but it was the philosophy more than anything, and the fact that people were actually practicing it, I suppose, because Krishna consciousness is not that different from Christianity or any theistic, doctrine. But it just seemed to explain things a lot more clear, and the people who were explaining it was most important, I suppose.
The basis of the marriage is a spiritual basis. So when we enter marriage, we both know that it is for life, and there will never be any separation. We won't break up. So the philosophy then is helpful when you're married. You aren't going to start thinking, oh, I don't like him anymore, I'll get a divorce. So that helps you to stay together.
You talked about no illicit sex and marriage in some way. Are there restrictions on you in relation to marriage and your sexuality?
Well, restriction is a very, very controversial word, because everything is voluntary. Just like I was saying earlier, I grew up and whatever and got into this, that and the other. I can still do that. There's nothing stopping me, but I choose now not to do that. So the restriction is a voluntary restriction. That's important, because sometimes people confuse that. They think that there's some outside restriction, that somebody's imposing something on you. So it's a voluntary restriction. But yeah, there would certainly be restriction. The idea is that sexual activity is quite a binding activity to this material world. If you're attached to sexual activity, then you're gonna have to stay. It's going to disqualify you, if you like, from God's abode. To be overly attached to sexual activity. But having said that, there is also, in terms of procreation, that activity, that is a service to God, because you're generating children, and then the idea is that you will raise those children with a view to encouraging them in religious, spiritual life. So there's a restriction for if you like, frivolous sexual activity. But for raising children in God consciousness, then that's a very acceptable form.
So contraception would be out of the question, would it?
Yeah.
In the days before new housing, Ballymurphy was a notorious trouble spot, the epitome of working class Belfast.
Well, my family, you know, although they were put under a lot of pressure, I suppose, because of coming from Belfast 3 months before we joined. That's my brother, Patrick, who's also a devotee, and a brother was killed, you know, in the Troubles, you know, sectarian affair. And so from that point of view, it was like losing 2 other sons, I suppose, and that was quite tough, but we were aware of that. So we went home and visited my mum and dad, you know, so they were just happy that, you know, that we were content in what we were doing, and I think more importantly, they weren't going to lose us in the same way that they lost my brother, you know.
Affluent Leafy Malone was more or less untouched by sectarian violence, a strong difference to the culture of Krishna.
I'm sure most devotees would say the same thing. You don't go home and say, Mom, I'm going to be a Hare Krishna, and your parents go, oh, that's wonderful. They just don't say it. But on the other hand, they're very reasonable people. They're both educated, intelligent people. And as the years have gone past, I'm devotee 10 years now, they can see that I'm happy and I'm settled and I'm contented. And that's ultimately all a parent wants for their child.
And how about the cross-religious thing? Ballymurphy, Malone Road.
Well, never came into it.
No,
never came into
that
it.
wouldn't really have bothered my parents.
And it wouldn't have bothered my parents before I became a Hare Krishna. So we weren't Protestant Catholic, we were Hare Krishna and marrying Hare Krishna, so I didn't miss it.
To leave Andersonstown, the pillar of Belfast republicanism for Krishna, was difficult for people there to understand.
My mother was worried, obviously, because I was so young and they thought it was just a phase I was going through. But she was okay after she saw I was happy and that it was what I wanted to do. For 2 years, I waited anyway before I joined, so after that she was accepting that I was going to be a devotee.
A nostalgic journey back to Donnycarney points up how much Pragosh has departed from his native culture and religious beliefs.
I just don't really do anything now that I would have done. And it's just so nice to have the philosophical security of knowing why things happen, you know, and if things don't go well for you, you know, you have the understanding that, yeah, that's karma, you know, that's the way things go, you know, like, I mean, ultimately these things don't matter so much. The main thing is that we prepare ourselves for the time of death and hopefully go back to God, you know, so yeah, totally transformed my life. Yeah.
Food seems to be a huge thing for Hare Krishnas. Besides that, but you're actually working in a cafe. You've set up a cafe here. Could you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, the Hare Krishna movement is sometimes called the kitchen religion because food is a very important part of the whole thing. But we set up the cafe so as people could contact us and come and see what we're doing down here at the community, and also the food, because we make it for Krishna and we offer it, then it becomes purified. It's called prasadam. That means Krishna's mercy. So whoever takes that food will also make spiritual benefit. So that was the idea behind the cafe then.
And we will prepare the food very nicely, and then we will offer the food to Krishna, to God, and then we will accept his remnants, God's remnants. So everything that we do, in a nutshell, we do it with a view to serving God, and that he'll be happy with it.
The beauty of Krishna consciousness is that you can, whatever you are doing, you don't actually have to change. All you have to change is your consciousness. You have to make it into Krishna consciousness. So I love gardening. So instead of doing it for myself, I do it for Krishna. Like I would see this as Krishna's house, and I've made a garden for Krishna. So I love to spend as much time as possible in the garden. And as far as growing all our fruits and vegetables are concerned, Krishna says, you offer to me fruit, flower, leaf and water. So if we can grow those things ourselves to offer, it makes it more special.
Well, you see, reincarnation, you know, again, is something that a lot of people misunderstand. The simple point is that this body that I'm in now, that you know me as Pragosh, and that I know you as Mick, the body that we're residing in, it won't be here in 100 years' time. In 100 years' time, we'll both be dead, the body will be gone. But we won't be gone. Every religious tradition understands that we're eternal. So the eternal part of us is the soul. So the soul is eternal, the body's temporary. So where does the soul go when your body dies? That's all reincarnation means. It has to go somewhere, whether it goes to heaven, whether it goes to hell, or whether it comes back here, it goes somewhere. So that's all that reincarnation means.
I could never understand why, if God is all merciful, he could consign somebody to hell forever. It just was inconceivable to me. But when it was explained to me that he doesn't do that, you have many lifetimes and you would work your way up according to your pious activities or be punished for bad activities. That was very logical to me, and that really made sense.
It's not easy. I mean, attaining love of God is a very difficult thing, especially at this time. But everything that we do is trying to help us along. So that's the why the lifestyle is.
And it's very rewarding. You know why you're doing it. It's not as though you're in ignorance that you're just doing something out of ignorance. You know there's a goal and there's an aim that you're trying to attain. So it's very rewarding.
Well, we've got something to live for. When you experience the happiness that the Christian consciousness brings, each day brings a new day. I'm saying you're thinking that today I will serve Krishna, and not that you have to think of this very clearly all the time, but you do sometimes, and you think I've got so much going for me. Especially when I think of the contrast in my previous life. So who wouldn't be happy?
Shaunaka Rishi Das, originally from Wexford, is Director of International Communications for the Hare Krishnas in Europe. He's involved in an interfaith dialogue with various religious movements in Northern Ireland. He resents the Hare Krishnas being described as a cult.
You can say that anyone's a cult, you can point at anyone and say they're homosexual. What's the basis of that charge? We're very careful about who we take into our kind of seminaries or our ashrams or our communities. In the early days, of course, we took in everybody in our broad approach, but we quickly learned that everybody isn't suitable for that kind of a lifestyle. The vast majority of people who join our community don't join communities as such. They live at home and practice at home according to their own ability. But we're very, very careful about who we allow in, what's their capacity for being able to follow this lifestyle. And we test them. They have to go through an interview procedure, etc.
There has been allegations of brainwashing as well. I mean, in the past. How do you...
Yes, well, in the past, there was one famous case in 1989 when one fellow charged that we kidnapped him, took him to our island, and we held him very much against his will. We wouldn't feed him unless he chanted Hare Krishna, usual kind of charges that you'd hear against wacko cults. So we went to the Chief Commissioner of the Police, and we said to him, if we're doing this, we have to be stopped. And if we're not doing this, then he has to be stopped making such false accusations. So the Gardaí instigated an inquiry based on the fact that if we're doing this, they have to investigate us for kidnapping charges. And he was brought to court for wasting police time, and he was given a 3-year suspended sentence, and we were exonerated from these charges. That's the kind of thing that we had to do. We didn't feel like we wanted to do that, but we had to do it to prove to people these charges are baseless. And if there is base to these charges, there are laws in this country that will take care of us. But on the other side, Irish men and Irish women have died so that people like us could express ourselves. Irish people like ourselves could make our own decisions as to what religion we're going to practice.
Has the movement got a social outreach?
Yes, yeah, we have a number of social outreaches. One of the most obvious ones is our Food for Life program that we do in Belfast and in Dublin. We distribute 4 times a week in Dublin to the homeless and the needy, and once a week here in Belfast. Internationally, we've fed 850 million people to date with that program. We're presently working in Sarajevo and in Sukhumi and many other trouble spots also. So we're regularly distributing food. Our founder said that no one within 10 miles of our temple should go hungry. So it's like our ethic, or it's part of very much part of our tradition.
Next week, The Movie Makers with Gabriel Byrne and David Putnam on Would You Believe next Wednesday.